Welcome back to the Questions About Life podcast. I'm Brian Fleming.
And I'm Daniel Broome.
And on this podcast, we talk about questions about life that people often wonder, but they're afraid to ask, or maybe they didn't think to ask before, or they want to ask, but they don't have anyone in their life that thinks like them, or maybe on a different level where they can ask that. Maybe they're afraid to ask the question because of fear of being ridiculed for an honest question. That happens all the time. So on this podcast, we discuss those kinds of questions, and as you send them in, we'll discuss them. But we talk about the questions that we come up with, or just the things about life that we wonder as Daniel and I hang out. And if you want to send in a question, be sure to send it to questionsoboutlifepodcast@gmail.com. And
Yeah. I mean, we don't claim to have any of the answers to the questions about life, but we like discussing them and maybe getting a little bit closer to those answers. And so if that's something you're interested in, keep watching.
Absolutely. And the question we're going to kick off today with is, did we come into this world, existence-wise as humans, did we come into this world, or did we come out of this world? And
very philosophical question.
Yeah, it's the kind of stuff like when I'm just driving down the highway, it pops into my head.
Yeah.
that literally, that's how that happened. It might seem odd, but maybe I am.
There's a lot of different angles to look at that from, too. Did
you
come into it?
Like, what do you mean by blank? Or, you have to really, really start defining things because of the different diverse worldviews.
Yeah, that's true. Like, are we dealing with the matter? The physical matter? Are we dealing with consciousness? Are we dealing with all of the above?
What do you mean by world? You mean Earth or the universe or all of known and unknown existence or beyond? What do you mean by world? So I think where this came from in my head was, growing up, in a more church environment, I was always told there's a real common phrase in Christianity, for example, you're in this world, but you're not of it. And the idea is, yeah, you're here, but your real home is in heaven somewhere else. And I get that. Maybe, okay, heaven isn't earth, or okay, that's maybe a literally different place. God, I hope this isn't heaven. if Earth is heaven right now, this sucks. We got a raw deal. But yeah. So the idea is, my whole life, I've started looking a lot more philosophically at things I was taught or things I hear that people just nonchalantly say and accept. Like, you can get a preacher to go, get real fired up in a sermon and go, you're in this world, but you're not of this world. And people clap and they cheer. And I wonder sometimes, do they have any idea what the hell that guy just said? Like, or the implications of what that means? I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, do you understand what that means as it applies to your life, and maybe how that shaped you, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not picking on church. I just, it's the place I come from where I do question a lot of things. I question everything, but I don't do church any favors by giving them a free pass either. And some would like that, others would not. And I respect the ones who do not want the free pass. They're like, yeah, bring me the questions. I'd love to talk about. I'm like, yes. So I had this thought though. If we are not of this world, if we are in this world but not of it, meaning we didn't, if the idea is true to us that we came, I want to make sure I'm saying it right. Where was it? I'm looking at my phone. Oh yeah, did we come into this world or did we come out of it? If we came into this world, it means we came here from somewhere else. And I know we could define somewhere else. How do you look at that? But just keeping this very, very plain and pragmatic, practical. If I came here from somewhere else, that means I'm separate from where I came from. And you want to be really careful with ideas that want to convince you that you are separate. Because think about back in the caveman days. Or if you're a churchgoer, think of the Old Testament days. Or the New Testament, the early New Testament days. Back in those times, if you committed a crime, the worst punishment was exile. They kick you out. You're no longer a part of the tribe. There's the wilderness. Go.
Good.
It was that. Yeah, that's a death sentence.
Yeah.
That's better, or not better, worse than just hanging you from the highest tree in the town square, because you're separate from us now. You need other people. We all need other people, and now you are separate, and that is scary. It's anxiety-inducing. And from a business standpoint, I mean, I hate how this sounds. This is why marketing gets a bad rap. But from a business standpoint, you have to solve a problem. If there ain't a problem, no one's buying. If someone doesn't have the problem you're selling the solution to, they're not going to buy. And there are a lot of business people, they create problems and then sell you a solution. Politicians do it all the time. And, religion is not exempt from that either. They've been doing it for thousands of years. They're probably some of the best with this mindset. And I'm not accusing everyone of being slick like that, or if you're in ministry or in church, I'm not saying that's the reason you do it. Just underlying over history, we've seen this to be true. But if I can convince you that you're separate from nature, from God, from, if I'm separate from you, if I'm separate from everything, my primal instincts to survive kick in. And it's scary.
Yeah, you want to find a group. You want to find a group to connect yourself to. There's
safety in a group.
Yeah.
But if I can be convinced that I'm separate, we talked about this in another podcast, I think, when we were talking about school shootings. This person feels separate, that they're not the same, that they're in a foreign place. I mean, on a battlefield, if I got separated from my platoon in Afghanistan, that's scary as hell. That is the worst place a soldier can be, is separated from his platoon or her platoon in a war zone.
Yeah.
Primally, your survival's kicking in because there's safety in that platoon. But if I'm separated, now there's danger. So my point, I guess, bringing it back up, is if we came into this world, it implies separateness, that we came from somewhere else. But when I look around, I know I'm talking a lot, but I'll end right here. If we came into this world, we must have come from somewhere else. Again, that we have to be really definitive on what we mean by somewhere else, what context, in what sense. But if we came out of this world, then we're a part of all of this. We're not separate. We're not weird. We're not an alien in a foreign land or separate from everybody else. Like, if you really believe that we came out of this world, like the trees and the plants and everything else in existence came out of whatever this thing we came out of, that is existence, the ground of existence that we've all come out of. If you believe that, you couldn't possibly ever feel separate from all of this, and you couldn't feel hostile or anxious for that reason, at least, because you would never feel like you don't belong, because no matter if you have people in your life who abandon you, you would know, I'm part of a bigger human race that I am a part of. In fact, there's no way that we can't be a part of this. There's no way we can't belong if we all come from the same bedrock or the same soil of existence. And so that's why I asked that question. Did we come into this world, or did we come out of this world? And I think it has a lot of very strong implications in how we live our life and the results we get, the outcomes, and what we experience. And, if we create danger and hostility, or if we create love and acceptance and a good place to live.
Yeah, that's you had a lot. You got that all.
Now Daniel can talk.
No, I think that was a pretty good description of kind of the idea. There's lots of things that we can take from what you just said and kind of branch off of it. Like, for example, if we came from this world, if we're a part of this world, that's the one that there's two. What were the two? The two is, do we come from this world, or do we come from out of this world?
Did we come into this world, or did we come out of this world?
So if we came out of this world, which there's, we could probably just follow the evidence of, like, if we're looking at like physical matter, for example, right? Like what,
in that sense.
Yeah. Like how did I become born? Well, my dad busted a nut inside my mom.
And mixed with her lady parts. We're not scientists, obviously.
Yeah.
And then your embryo began forming or whatever.
Right. So I originated as a cocktail of sperm and female egg, right?
Yeah.
But
human protoplasm, yeah.
Yeah, so you could say, okay, well, you didn't come from this world or from out of this world. You came from a sperm and an egg. Well, not really, because what was that sperm and that egg before it was a sperm and an egg?
Did that come from the world, or did that come from outside the world?
Well, it was,
because you're a product of that.
It's a product of the food that my dad and my mom ate. They would ingest food, and their bodies would produce sperm and eggs. Well, what kind of food were they eating? Well, they were eating, and this is, I want to, maybe we can tackle this portion at another later on, but food is only living beings, right? Like everything that is food had a life. There's no exception to that.
Yeah.
So, maybe the sperm was some water my dad drank and a cheeseburger that he had
and some other
Tuesday
molecules
before, right?
Yeah.
And my mom had a salad or whatever. And so I used to be a salad and a cheeseburger. But that salad and a cheeseburger used to be
on some molecular
a head of lettuce growing in a farm and a cow grown in Texas. Well, what was the cow before that? The cow was cow sperm. And then it's a continuing cycle, right? So in that sense...
So what were you eating? What was your dad eating?
In that sense, when it comes down to physical, like, did we come out of this world? Yes, we did, because our physical matter came out of this world. Now, we could probably take that a step further, like several steps further, and take it all the way back to physical matter somewhere in the universe that was positive here in the earth and everything else. But on top of that, I think it's really interesting what you said about whichever you believe, or you'll live your life different ways. So like it's well known that like Native Americans used to view themselves as part of nature. They weren't, the earth wasn't here for them. They were part of the earth, and
like they coexisted with it as a different piece of creation. Like, yeah, there's a plant.
They were part of the system.
On this other plant thing in this whole system of,
we're all helping each other out.
Or not plant, but a thing that exists. Okay.
Yeah, like life helps other life survive. But from a personal perspective, I spend a lot of time alone at my cabin in Oklahoma, and for a lot of people, being alone is a scary thing, right? And there was a time in my life where it was scary for me too, or maybe not scary, but uncomfortable.
See, I've never understood that, because I value my alone time. Like, I love being alone. Like, I have to regulate my alone time, or else I'll get, like, I have a wife and 2 kids,
Yeah.
But I don't understand it through experience, but I've heard that said a lot.
Yeah.
There's even that old quote, what I don't remember who said it, but they said basically the root of all human conflict was it Pascal or something, is based in a man's inability to sit in a room alone with himself, or something like that.
Yeah.
So that kind of ties into what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. And like in this area, you've been out there with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the middle of nowhere, and
pretty nice.
Yeah, it's nothing but
nice place to be alone.
Yeah. But I just remind myself of that sometimes, where I'm out there by myself and I'm in the middle of nowhere, and if any sort of uncomfortable feelings which is rare for me too, because I also really enjoy being alone, but if any uncomfortable feelings come up because I'm alone, I just remind myself, like, oh, like I'm not alone. Like, I'm part of this whole system. Like, I'm part of these trees,
the whole ecosystem.
I'm with everything else right now. Yeah.
They'd be like the tree outside the cabin going, oh my gosh, I'm alone. It's like, no, there's a human inside this cabin. There's like 1,000 other trees around you.
Yeah. Or
like,
maybe
why would you think you're alone?
And she's like, hey, Daniel's here.
That sounds like an episode of Family Guy. Yeah, let's mess with him. We'll make noises in the night, and they got mouths that talk, and a little tree hole turns into a mouth.
Yeah. Start, like, yeah.
Sorry,
No, that's okay. That's all right. No, I agree with you that there's two different. It's real easy for like our ego to go, yeah, I'm here, and the world is here to serve me. The trees are there so we can make wood, so we can build things, or which it's kind of true, I guess. But or we could view it as I'm part of all of this. Like we're all. It's all a song, and I'm just one of the instruments,
or one of the musical notes being played in the whole song, even on a smaller level.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's true.
Or you might be the silent sound between the notes, which music cannot exist without.
I could be the note that they left out because it's like, it doesn't really belong.
Okay, now you can feel separate.
That one's kind of weird.
Nature left you out. Nature abhors you. Nature rejects you, my friend.
Yeah. No, but what was the other thing that you said I thought was interesting is, like you were saying, you were talking about how in business or in church or anywhere, you almost have to create a problem to be able to attract people, because you got to.
Nobody pays attention if you don't.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah, and then you got to create a problem, and you got to provide the solution, and that's why people will show up. And not to say that it's not it's not a real problem and it's not a real solution. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it's interesting how that works, because if we step back and stop taking things at face value, whether it's in business, religion, or any problems that arise, and we ask ourselves, is it really a problem, or have I just been led to believe that this is a problem? Or is this an agreement, like we were talking about the 4 Agreements book earlier?
Yeah, somebody told me
this.
This
Is an agreement that we've all made, then I've just accepted as true.
Well, because we never had a counter agreement presented to us that maybe made more sense.
Yeah,
we were told something and we never questioned it, and so we live as if it's true, and then then we're shocked when we see results, or as the Bible might say, the fruit of that comes to fruition. And it's like, well, of course that came about. Like, that's what you believed would, and that's how you live, as if that's going to happen every single day. And now you're surprised when it does. Yeah. That's when it's like, oh, ye of little faith. It's not believing for something you don't want, or something you do want, but it's like if you believe bad things and you think bad things, and then you don't expect them to happen, that's where it's more weird for me. Mm-hmm. Not that if I dream about a donut right now, it's going to magically appear in front of me. But there is something to be said where if you're thinking on something, if you're focusing on something, you tend to see a lot of it or notice it.
For sure.
Before I bought my Jeep a couple years ago, I started thinking I want to buy a Jeep. Old Jeep, big tires, rip the top off. I started seeing Jeeps everywhere. Mm-hmm. Now, I always saw them. I just didn't notice them.
Your brain was just filtering them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, which wasn't as important to you. And then another dimension of that too is like we're not static entities, right? Like we're as humans, we're constantly evolving. So
constant motion and movement in every way.
Yeah, and so my critical thinking skills and my intelligence and my ability to communicate and all that was not the same yesterday, and it wasn't the same when I was 5. I remember like when I was 5 or when I was a kid, it was like adults knew everything.
What a funny concept at 38 for me.
Yeah, people my age had all the answers. They knew everything. They did everything right. And so,
how disappointed are you
so
right
it's like
now?
What they say is definitely true. And oftentimes it was, right? It's like they'll tell you stuff and it turned out to be true. But also some of it may not have been. And we didn't have the critical thinking skills at the time to really evaluate them. We're just like, oh, well, everything Dad says is true. So that's
and if you disagreed, well, you automatically know as a kid they probably know more, and they're just going to prove you wrong 10 ways to Sunday, even if they're just making stuff up. You don't know any better.
Yeah,
for me to convince you of something, I just need to know like a tiny bit more about it, so I can talk about it in such a way where I sound so understanding of the topic at hand that I talk a little bit over your head. Most people will shut down and not argue or debate at that point.
Yeah.
And so there's manipulators out there, whether it's in the church or secular realm, where they will do that because they know like 90% of people, if they do just that, they can kind of stomp on the rest and not have to deal with it.
Sure.
And the people who can question them and communicate on their level, they either won't have discussion or they'll vilify the other person. Yeah. Because they're playing defense now. It's like the Wizard of Oz, the curtain fell down and it's just this little guy, and do not pay attention to the man with the microphone.
Yeah.
It's like, we're looking at you. And it's like, oh, don't pay attention to me. It's being exposed. And so that can happen. It does happen a lot.
Well, in defense of the people that are behind the curtain in that example, is like they may believe things that they never examined. They never took the time to examine them.
They taught what they were taught to teach.
They just learned it the way that they were teaching us, you know.
Yeah.
And they just that must be true. I learned that when I was 5, and that's what Dad said. And they never took the time to examine it later.
Totally.
You know,
I often wonder that with a lot of my friends who have higher seminary training, theology training, because a lot of very smart people. But I also know the premise of everything they're taught is to bring it back around to them being right, because that's really what at least in Christianity, like in a lot of other world religions, you're taught that there is no possibility that you could ever be wrong.
Yeah.
Everyone else is wrong. Like, to me at this point in life, religion, it's like my own definition of religion. Not spirituality, but religion is like a group of people who are absolutely convinced that everyone in the world is going to hell except for them. And they all disagree with each other. Like, we can't all be right, But I often wonder, because I'll ask friends who have a lot of knowledge in that, who have studied to the nth degree of theology, God, philosophy, existence, existential issues, and it was from a religious standpoint. It was, through religious educational institutions, which nothing wrong with that, but it is bias, and so like the version and explanations they were given about everything. Well, it does make sense within the context of that.
Yeah.
But what about when it doesn't? And most of them don't like to talk about things that are outside that context, because they're sort of like an excuse or an explanation for everything. I mean, the church has been doing this thousands of years. They are very well practiced.
Yeah.
But there's an excuse. I don't mean that in a bad way, but or an explanation for every rebuttal or argument there could possibly ever be. And it's like, and basically all they're really worried about when you're discussing faith with a non-believer is that you're equipped to give a good, convincing, intelligent response, which is good if you stand for any cause. Like, I don't blame them. But it ultimately leads back to, it would never end with them being right. It always comes back to how you're right. Or you'll meet the rare person of faith who will say, this is how I understand it currently. And is there a slim chance that I could be absolutely wrong? Of course. And I've always been one of those people, because I know I don't know everything. And the more I learn, the more I know I don't know.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I can't, Brian, you don't have faith. You don't have 100% faith that the way you were taught is the only absolute right. Hell no. Like, the dude, how could I? Yeah. How, like, in everything I've been taught, I mean, you think about the centuries of murder by the church. It's like, they're the ones who have propagated and passed the Bible through the centuries. I'm like, yeah, there's no politics or screwiness in there. And it's not that there isn't good discussions in there, good life lessons. But if there was a political book passed through the centuries on politics, like on communism or something, well, of course it's going to favor the message they're trying to propagate. But do you think all those politicians who wrote that and propagated it and passed it on, do you think they all had totally pure intentions or even divine insight? I mean, a lot of people who wrote the Bible, they were just guys like us. Mm-hmm. And they weren't special. They were just guys. Some were fishermen, one was a doctor. There's several things. And I always think, like, well, if they had divine insight, if they got, a real download from God, well, why wouldn't I? They weren't better than me.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not being arrogant. I'm just saying, like, any priest or preacher or pastor, if it's a man, that's just a guy.
Like, yeah, and humans are flawed, right?
And that's nothing against them, but it's like, if God spoke to them and gave them all this insight, well, why wouldn't he speak to me too?
Yeah.
And I'm just, it makes me wonder, like, there's so many things that it's, anyway. I don't even know how to put into words some of the stuff I'm thinking, but.
Well, I mean, it's like...
And I'm not vilifying the church. I'm just saying, it's not a church or like certain churches. It's the underlying thing that, like I'd said a minute ago, I don't even know if some people who, they a lot of pastors, they're preaching what they're taught they're supposed to believe and teach. And they might not have even questioned on a deeper level to go, do I even believe what I'm teaching? Because there's so much social pressure and social reward.
Financial reward
for in a lot of ways.
Of the church,
yeah, in a lot of ways for going along with it. And it's comfortable to just kind of know that, or think that, hey, this is the way it is, and everyone around me tells me I'm right. Well, I love feeling that way. Yeah. I just don't ever. I'm always looking over my shoulder if I'm ever in that position, though.
Yeah, and there's probably a personal responsibility for that leader of the church. It's everybody's dependent on me. I'm not gonna try to prove myself wrong or anything. That's
a lot of pressure too. Admittedly,
humans are flawed. So the point you were making, humans are flawed, and so the people in your example with the Bible, they're just regular people that wrote down the text that's in the Bible. 60 years ago, doctors were recommending certain brands of cigarettes.
Yeah.
Because they were healthy for you.
Top doctors smoke Marlboro or Camel.
And so that was 60 years ago. And so, yeah, there's always the potential for us to be wrong. And I think we constantly are evolving with our knowledge and our understanding of things. Oh, here's a good example. There's a current one.
Okay.
Have you seen, and I'm not trying to get political or anything, but it's relevant to the conversation. Have you seen the CDC's newest guidelines on COVID?
Oh, it's basically what everyone on the right-wing side has been saying all along, probably, I would imagine.
Man,
in other words, you don't need a mask. You can still get and spread COVID if you get the vaccination. In other words, just move on with your life. I haven't kept up with it, but that's what I've recently heard, because a lot of my conservative friends have been posting memes like, oh, CDC current guidelines, you were right all along, or something like that.
Yeah, this is from NPR, but they pulled it from the CDC's website. And NPR is a very liberal-leaning news organization, but here's the new COVID-19 guidance from CDC.
And we're doing this in August of 2022.
Yeah, so it's bullet points. So bullet point 1, those exposed to the virus are no longer required to quarantine. Bullet point 2, unvaccinated people now have the same guidance as vaccinated people. Bullet point 3, students can stay in class after being exposed to the virus. The fourth and final bullet point is it's no longer recommended to screen those without symptoms. So it's basically, you can sum all this up in a few words.
It's a non-issue.
Don't fucking worry about it. Stop worrying about COVID. And I'm not
go back to your regular lives, folks.
Yeah. I'm not trying to make a political statement here, but
no, but you're right.
That's the CDC, which we've touted as they're the authority on this and everything else. Yeah. They're basically admitting that they were wrong all along.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no politicians lining pockets in that whole equation. Yeah.
So and if we're using religion as an example, it's just how are we taking 2,000-year-old text, 2022-year-old text, or maybe a little older?
Ish.
Yeah. And
plus or minus 100-ish years.
Sure. And how are we taking that and just going, oh yeah, everything verbatim, just nothing's changed, everything's good, even though smoking was healthy for you 60 years ago, and the world was ending, a year ago.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah. Well, for me it wasn't, but for a lot of people who believed, that goes back to that belief, they believed it was.
Yeah. So I think the lesson there is none of us are above going ahead and re-examining everything that you believe to be true. Religion, politics, whatever. And maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but just examine it, take a look at it, and reevaluate.
Well, and here's something relevant to that. When I was in Bible college, because any of you listening don't know, I went to Bible college. So I've studied this stuff. I was taught to know this stuff. I was taught to defend this stuff. And I do defend a lot of it. There's a lot of great stuff in it. But there are things that were not addressed. And one of the things is whenever we were taught in the theology and apologetics classes, apologetics is rebuttals in defense of the Christian faith, questions non-believers would have, how to answer them. And one of the things was, how do you know that the Bible is really the actual Word of God? Because it was written by man. Well, one of the big rebuttals is, yes, it was written by man, but it was inspired by God. And so I thought, Okay. But says who? Oh, the guys who wrote it. So I'm like, okay, so my book Redeployed is right there on the shelf on the other side of Daniel. If you didn't agree with something in Redeployed that I wrote, they could say, people could say, well, Brian, you wrote that. Like, you're just a guy. Yeah, but what I wrote was inspired by God. In other words, if you argue with me, you're not arguing with me. You're questioning the God of the universe. And if you keep questioning him, you're going to spend, like, forever in hell and burning. And there's this fear-mongering. And so it's like, well, yeah, but it was inspired by God. Well, says who? The guys who wrote it. Like, well, isn't that convenient? Like, I should do that. That way nobody will argue. You know, at least a good portion won't argue with me if I can convince them God spoke through what I wrote. Yeah. Or is it because we're so far removed from the original authors, they've been dead for thousands of years, that we just, because of the fact they're all dead and they're old, that we sort of give them sainthood and assign them divine connection that, well, us peasants don't have. Because, you know, another disturbing thing, I've never been to a church where you were encouraged, like, to know what a great creation, what an intelligent person you are. Like, if you're really good at something, you're really gifted. It's not that churches aren't encouraging, but the people who get the most praise, and it's very subtly pushed and encouraged, is the guy who walks in and goes, man, I'm just a dirty, filthy, rotten, low-life sinner who doesn't deserve anything. Then they go, and they tout these two words, but God. But God still loves me. But God still, it's this underlying, you're a piece of shit, you're guilty because you exist, you were born a sinner, even though God created you that way, he's going to punish you for it because it's your defect that he created when he created you. Yeah. In other words, if Ford Mustang fucks up a Mustang, when it has a recall, well, Ford doesn't take responsibility for it. They just send all of those Mustangs to the junkyard and the demolition derby to have them decimated because it was the car's fault. Yeah. That I've never been. I can't figure out for the life of me. And it's not an excuse for sin. Like, yeah, if you choose to go out and kill somebody or shoot a 5-year-old in the face with a 12 gauge, yeah, that's bad. Like, you did that. Like, I'm not saying that. But with so many things that we're told are sinful or bad, it's like, but you're just sort of doing what you naturally do because that's what humans do. That's how we're created. Not that they're all good or productive. Like, I mean, you go sleep with 10,000 people, you're probably going to get something, you know? But
at least a little bit of child support.
Yeah, or be given out a lot of child support, depending if you're the man or the woman, especially if you're in Texas. But
yeah, Texas hates dads.
Oh man, yeah, dads really get the short end. But that's my point. It's like, my point is like, I forgot where I was going. We were talking about.
You're talking about flaws and that the church doesn't encourage people.
Well, that's just, yeah, and I'm not picking on the church. I'm just pointing out a fact. If I went in and I said, man, I've been speaking for 15 years. I've written 4 books. I love my life. Like, people tell me I'm a good speaker. Like, and I know I'm a good speaker. Mm-hmm. Like, I am blessed with a gift of communication. Like, I'm not being arrogant. But if I say that, people are going to go, oh, he needs to be humbled. He better realize God gave him that. Well, of course he did. I didn't make me. Like, I'm not saying anything we don't already know, so why is it a problem? Sure. You know, it's not like Muhammad Ali or Conor McGregor going, I'm the best, you suck. It's not that. Yeah. But it's like, even acknowledging, like I've been blessed. It's like, and it's almost like you can't do anything right. And if you take any credit, you're trying to take it away from God. But it's also like, if I did something really good and God made me, doesn't that bring glory and credit to God through what happened? But people don't see it that way. And unless you point that out and they don't want to look wrong if they're pointing the finger at you, then they go, oh, well, if you mean it that way, it's like, okay. And I'm like, but it's all this separateness. I think it comes back to a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's what I was thinking as you were describing that. Is like, if we are God's creation and we have there's something beautiful about us, like, for example, your capacity to communicate
and encourage people and make them feel better about something. What a good thing.
Yeah. And so that you would think that people would celebrate that. Like, look what God did for Brian. Look what.
Yeah, I'm not against that. I'm not saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just don't even know what else to say about that, except for it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Well, anytime you put humans in any equation, it's complicated.
Yeah, and I think that is the root of it all, right? We're all sort of limited to our consciousness, and I read something yesterday, and I don't remember the numbers, but there's a spectrum of light. That's what everything that we see is just light bouncing off of stuff, right? And there's a spectrum of it, and I don't remember what the numbers are, but let's just say that it was something like this. Let's say that the spectrum of possible light vibrations, or whatever you want to call it, is 1 to 1,000. Mm-hmm. And that's what's possible, or that's what's actually happening. But our eyes are only capable of seeing between 246 and 347. We can only see inside of that
I know where you're going with this.
range, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing is true for sound. We only see a very small sliver of what's actually happening, or the noises that are actually happening around us. We can't, like a dog whistle. Mm-hmm. Humans can't hear a dog whistle, but
dogs
can
go
hear
nuts
it because they can hear that frequency, and we can't. We're not capable. So there's probably a lot more going on around us right now. We just don't have the tools to perceive them, and perception is reality, right? So
or more than in a lot of cases. Yeah. It doesn't matter what's true. It's what people perceive to be true. It's what they act on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everything that we know or claim to know, every human being in the history of time, every living, thinking animal in the history of time, past, present, and future, the only thing that they don't know anything beyond what they've perceived. And so, because of that, we're flawed, because we're all limited to our own perceptions. That's where differences of opinion come from, because one person might have perceived things a certain way or had some sort of core memory, and then another person had another experience that had the opposite effect, and there's two different perceptions. And so, yeah, humans are imperfect.
And whoever won the war wrote the history book on how it is, and
conveniently
left out their adversary who they defeated in their point of view.
Yeah. Or a great example of that, we were just talking about this, is the Library of Alexandria. Was that in Rome or Italy or somewhere? Supposedly it contained, I might have that wrong about Italy, but it was in Europe.
Somewhere over there.
Yeah.
Pretty much conquered the known world. Yeah.
Yeah. It was supposedly just full of all this ancient knowledge, like how did they cut the stones for
like Stonehenge or something, or the pyramids.
How did they get that done? Like, it contained all that stuff, and it burned down. But I think it burned down because the conquerors of that area, maybe it was the Romans or something. I don't know. I don't know a lot of stuff, but but I do know this: the Library of Alexandria contained a wealth of knowledge, and it burned, and we lost a lot of that. It was all contained to that library because it was a human being, or human beings. The government was keeping it a secret. A lot of people say that it went to the Vatican, but
I've heard things about the Vatican too. Not all glaringly charming either. I had a friend travel there, a person of faith who's a friend who went there a few years ago, and he said it was a really awkward experience.
It's creepy. I was there.
Not just the angels and stuff like that, like the paintings and all that, but even like the demonic things that they have in there. Again, I'm speaking from zero experience, but it's a friend of mine who's been a pastor, and he's been a person of faith for years. He came back and I had never. I grew up Catholic and I didn't know about anything like this about the Vatican, but he's like, man, it was an odd experience. Like, it was, like you said, kind of creepy.
Weird vibes in there.
Yeah. But hey, that 9-year-old guy who's a virgin, you should take your sex advice from him, because he's connected, more than you to God, right?
What's that? 9-year-old virgin?
Well, priests can't have sex, and neither can the Pope. They have to be celibate.
Well, it sounds like a lot of those priests have been getting a lot of ass.
Yeah, well, I believe that's because I don't think man was ever intended to be that way. But it's funny. I was just talking to my wife about, like, hey, where do you get the best sex advice? Now, if we ask any of our Christian friends, like, oh, go to the church, go to the pastor. And I'm thinking, dude, the last place I'm going for sex advice, if I want to enjoy myself,
having sex.
is if it's Catholic, it's a guy who's not having sex and isn't allowed to, and has chosen not to, publicly. But also, even if it's like, oh, pastors can be married, so, But I tell you, the most restricted place you can't be honest about how human sexuality really is would be the church world. And I think to myself, why would anyone go there to get like guidance on sex?
Yeah, the one guy that's not supposed to be having sex.
I mean, if I want to know how to do something, now I'll just leave it at that. If I don't know, hey, how do you do this? You hear that's really good. I'm going to try to find somebody who's been doing that a long time.
Yeah. Pornhub.
It's like no, I was going to say, if you want to know how to do stuff like, well, I don't know, a porn star who's been in the game for 20 years, they might know more than me about certain things. Wouldn't be a bad education. I'm not saying it's good stuff. I'm not saying it doesn't, that there isn't bad influence on that. Obviously there can be. I'm just saying on a very practical level, like that dude or that lady probably has an idea about how things work because they pretty much explored the spectrum of that. Or, I mean, yeah, there's, I'm not going to say it.
Oh, go ahead, man.
I got some advice recently from a guy who's in that industry for about 25 years, and he was near the top of it.
In the porn industry?
Yeah. No, I didn't do anything wrong. Don't anybody who's thinking I talked to a guy. Okay, that's all I'm saying. I chatted back and forth, by email, and well, there's something I was curious about. And, my wife and I, we take online courses about everything. We go through YouTube. We like to learn things. Well, this happened to be about, hey, I wonder how this particular intimate thing, I don't know how to do that. We spent like hundreds on courses that PhDs have taught and this and that and they tell you about why and the human body and psychology, all good information. Most of it didn't work. It was confusing. This guy, in about 3 sentences. 3 sentences. That was it. Like 3 sentences. Hey, if you just do this, you'll get this. If you just do this, it'll produce this outcome. And I'm like, okay. So I just went and I tried. I tried. And wow, that was all it was. Like the dude's like, yeah, man, I don't know these doctor people, these sexologists, PhDs. He's like, I spent 10,000 hours on my back. He's like, I got time in the trenches, man. He's like, I can tell you what works, and he's like, all these people and, who teach it and they got degrees in it. And he's like, I wonder, they're like, oh, we have these studies about like what works and why. And he's like, where are they getting these studies? Like who's walking around and they're asking people these deep, intimate questions that, and then even if they did talk to someone in what high school or military locker room, if 10 dudes are asked, hey, how long is your Johnson? It's like, oh, dude, they're all 13 inches long. It's like everybody, everyone's like 5 inches bigger than they really are. So it's like, he was like, his point was, where did they even get these results? And how do they verify? Like,
sure.
And he's like, just here, boom, 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 like 3 sentences. Here's how you do that. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, holy shit, I've been married 16 years. And I've always wondered about that. And I've paid for money. I've read articles. I've done research. I'm not advocating pornography, by the way. If you're wondering that, I'm a married man. By the way, I waited to have sex before I was married. My wife and I did. We waited till our wedding night. So I don't want any of your self-righteous horse shit, because I got advice from a guy who knows what he's talking about if you're listening to this and you're getting mad at me. But yeah, it was like, oh, if you just do this, this, and this, like that's all it is. Just keep doing that. I'm like, okay, that's way too simple. And it's like, oh, why did it take 16 years for me to find this guy to ask him a question? You know, like, you know, I don't know if he's still in the industry, but it's like,
I think what everybody's going to be wondering when they watch this is, what is it? But
because I'm not,
it sounds personal. So,
well,
you know.
I would have no problem saying, however, you know, obviously it involves my wife as well, and I don't have her consent or permission to talk about it, so I won't. But I'm a married man, and we're very happily married, and I'll leave it at that. And that's not the only reason, but it's one of the big reasons. And yeah, sometimes the best source of information is not the common one. It's not the one you would think or everyone points to. Yeah. Like if you've ever wondered, like, man, how do I have a better sex life in my marriage? Has anyone ever said, dude, you need to find a porn star? Just ask them. Now, that seems like the easiest thing because, well, who would know more? Mm-hmm. You know, or, you know, a guy, maybe he's not a porn star. Maybe he's a guy he's just been with a lot of women. He's like, dude, here's what works. I don't know. Now, I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying someone who practices something a lot tend to get very familiar and good at that.
Sure.
And if you're new to it, like anything, that's probably better than going and asking your biology teacher.
Yeah.
Which, he might know biology. Does he have a good sex life at home? Who knows? Does he have one at all? I don't know.
That's kind of like a professor at a university that teaches business that has never practiced business.
Has, like, never owned one.
Yeah. He's always been in the education system, so he knows all the book stuff. But, like, why would I go to somebody that's only read books about it and never had practical experience? Before I forget, though, we were talking about Catholic priests aren't allowed to have sex.
Yeah, there is celibacy. They have to take a vow of celibacy. Yeah.
But it hasn't always been that way. I read recently that
I don't believe so. I think you're right.
And I want to look that up because there's a reason. There's something happened in the church where let me see. Let me go to.
I can tell you what I know about.
Do you know? Okay, go ahead.
I don't know if it's everything, but basically, this, you know, the role of a spiritual leader is so important in a community that there's a lot of things like that. That's why, like, they would, a lot of times they wouldn't even get a paycheck way back when, but they were always taken care of. And one of the reasons is that nobody ever wanted to have the priest integrity called into question. Like, oh, what was he doing with that 16-year-old girl in the church alone? Well, he was confession. Oh, okay.
Oh, kind of like, oh, well, don't worry about it. He can't have sex anyway.
Well, it's one of those things where it removes a lot of the obstacles and barriers of, well, what was he doing? Because he needed to be the one verifiable, trusted source of integrity where he had no need. This is just one way of looking at it. He was so taken care of with no need that he didn't have to go out and make money and maybe do some shady business practices because he was trying to survive and the system was corrupt, or that it would be that he had sexual intentions with a young lady or any lady. As a reason for doing something. And so now on the sex thing, that's not entirely, I'm talking as a whole, because it's such a kind of a different setup of a lifestyle. This needed to be a person who nobody could blame for having impure motives. So a lot of, you know, I don't think they set their own salary or whatever, but they were taken care of enough where they could focus only on their duties as the high spiritual person in the community, and not have ulterior motives or have that creep in. That's just one piece of it.
Yeah, I just went looking for it, and I'd have to do a little bit more research on what the internet says. I believe everything that you just said, but everything I'm finding on the internet is written by the Catholic Church.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I want an outside opinion.
Yeah, not to say that wouldn't be historically correct in how things happen. It probably is.
Yeah.
But it's also through their lens and through what they would want you to know.
Yeah. Exactly.
And if there are things they don't want you to know, they're certainly not going to include them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But it sounds like that's a big problem, right? Because so many Catholic, there's been so many Catholic priests caught raping
kids.
Hundreds of young boys.
Yeah.
And probably girls too. I don't know.
Well, and the thing is too, when you hear about these cases, you find that they weren't locked up and throw away the key and sentenced to life in prison or something. They were moved to a new church.
Yeah, they were just reassigned.
They were just reassigned to a new community of people and children.
Yeah, here's
and that's the problem.
New pool of kids.
Yeah, this community
Don't
found
rate
out.
Those.
Yeah, we need to send you where nobody knows your name.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that they have nothing on you and can maybe stop doing that. Slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
And there's some great Catholic priests. I mean, I it's like police officers. I hate the fact that they all get a bad rap because of the handful, small or large, that ruined it for all of them. But like, there's some really good people who are priests. I mean, great men. But man, we never hear about them. And like you said, with that, it's happening so much. I think that goes back to the proof of the fact that men were never intended to survive and not have sexual intercourse. Yeah. To me, that's the most unnatural thing in the world.
Yeah,
and I think that's proof of it.
Strongest urges, right? It's like,
dude, men throw away their careers and families and livelihoods over a couple of hookups. They're willing to risk that, like you said.
Well, yeah, it's like, I think it's just as important. Well, affection, for sure, is just as important. Human interaction and affection is just as important as the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, the sleep that we get. I mean, it's a human necessity. We're wired that's our favorite form of affection. That's the way that we like.
We don't even choose. We don't choose it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just there.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing to deny. Like, if you've ever been in a situation where you knew you shouldn't be with a woman, but she's so attractive and she's coming on to you really strong, that to me, that is the most difficult situation to get up and walk out of. Maybe not for every guy. And since I've been married, I've not been in that. I've kept myself away from places like that. But as a single guy, it was like, I know I shouldn't be with this woman. And I've been able to get up and walk away successfully. A couple of times where I'm like, something in me is going, something ain't right. And something in the back of my head is overriding like what my body's telling me, like, dude, don't walk away. You're never going to get this chance again. But that, to me at least, that's probably the hardest situation I've ever encountered in my life ever.
Yeah.
And I imagine for most men, especially if you're young, or like maybe if you have a high sex drive, it seems almost impossible to walk away from.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a powerful, I guess you'd call it an urge, a powerful instinct that we have.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if it wasn't so powerful, the human race would have never made it this far, right? It's like humans love to have sex. And so... And
it didn't feel so good.
That's what's kept us reproducing. And so there's a balance, right? I've been reading this book recently, and there's a concept in there relative to this topic that I thought was pretty interesting. It's like, well, relative to did we come from this earth and
into this world, or did we come out of this world?
Yeah, okay. Or to the urge to have sex when you're not supposed to, all of that stuff. And it's something that I've been thinking on quite a bit. It said this is like a Stoic philosophy which I know you're familiar with. It's the Stoic philosophies is what if we just stopped looking at things as good or bad, good and bad? It just is what it is, right? Like that's where we get hung up on a lot of stuff. Is like, you don't do that because it's bad. Do this because it's good. But we're the humans are the entity that put those labels on it being bad or good. And for good reason, like if I went...
Of course, yeah, there are definitely situations we want that, yeah.
Yeah, so for example, like if you decided right now to, I don't know, punch me in the face or kill my dog, right?
I'm such a bastard.
Yeah. Just like, let's say you killed my dog. Let's say that my dog walked in this room, which would be weird because my dog's not here right now, but let's say that it did.
Dang, I shot my own dog.
Yeah. And you killed it. Well, I think everybody can agree, like, that's fucked up, right?
Yeah.
Or another way to say that is that's bad. We're going to call that bad.
Yeah.
But if we examine why it's bad, why is it bad? It's bad because now I'm, I love the dog. I'm emotionally stressed.
At a loss.
Yeah.
You lost something you cared about.
Yeah, like something that. So that's the biggest part. That there's two things. Like you took a life, so that life can't go on, and that makes me sad, and my kids are going to be sad, and everything else. But really, that's the only reason it's bad, because it makes me sad, and
or something along those lines is usually what we associate with that in defining bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
now, and there are some, like I said, there are some things too that even if we don't define it, I don't know. I mean, like the whole, hey, if you shoot a kid if you walk up to the door, some kid answers the door and you just like open up on him, like we would all, oh, bless you.
Probably COVID.
Yeah, probably COVID.
That's probably monkeypox.
I see what you did there, monkeypox.
Monkeypox.
Or crock pots, when people wear the Crocs in the sun and they get those little dots on their feet.
Anyway. Oh, yeah.
Anyway, but like I was saying, there's some things that I sometimes felt that you see it, and even if it's kind of like a gray area, you have some sort of idea that's wrong.
Yeah.
Of course, that could have been influenced also by previous. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, so I'm not saying that, I'm definitely saying that if you were to kill my dog, that would be bad. But what does bad mean? Like, it only means that I'm being hurt by it. Because nature doesn't care. Like, as we speak right now, there are predators that are eating other animals alive. Mm-hmm. They're eating
alive, and they're suffering, being eaten while they're in pain, dying slowly.
Yeah, and that's nature.
That's like torture.
Yeah, and whether you're religious, you're not religious, you could look at it like, well, that's just the way. That's God made it that way, or that's just the way things are. But it's not inherently bad, because it's just as bad as it is good. Because
you just call it the food chain.
Yeah, I mean...
Well, this is just the dog chain.
Yeah.
There were too many dogs around here, so I started blasting.
Yeah.
And sorry, yours got in the way.
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, we can find a lot of good things with you killing my dog. I can find good things in almost any situation. You killing my dog, well, I'm going to be saving money on feeding it now. Like there's always going to be something good
especially
that comes
if it eats like a horse like mine.
Yeah. Or the predator in the woods. Oh, wow, this animal's going through great suffering, getting eaten alive. Well, that's because I've chosen to be on that animal's side. Why aren't I celebrating it and viewing it as a good thing? Like, oh, good, that predator is going to be able to feed its babies.
Yeah, the lion's not starving.
Yeah. It caught one finally.
The bear's been hunting 3 days and it's finally not going to die.
Yeah,
and it's getting weaker.
Yeah, so it's all a matter of perspective on what's good and what's bad. I mean,
yeah. Definitely. I know people are going to contextualize that and just, I mean, like I totally see what you're saying. I don't know if we could ever live in a world where we would all see it that way, but I do agree with what you're saying, that we give meaning to what's good or bad, because then there's a mercy killing. Maybe you see an animal being eaten by a predator, and you have your long rifle and you're out there hunting. Well, you're 50 feet, 100 feet away, and you don't want to go up to the predator because it might maul you. And so you shoot you shoot the deer in the head. Mm-hmm. So it's not suffering now as it's being killed by another animal. You didn't do a bad thing shooting that animal, but you actually say you did it out of kindness, because, well, if it's going to die anyway, let's not have it suffer.
Yeah, and you're right, because you're right about, I should further explain, like, I'm not saying that you should feel free to go ahead and kill my dog, because the motivator that is probably keeping you from killing my dog, if you had that desire, which I don't think you do, but if you did, we're just using this as an example. The motivator is you don't want to hurt me. Yeah. You don't want me to be sad. You don't want this life to end.
Because of how it would affect people I care about, my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can, like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't follow what we think is good, and we shouldn't avoid what we think is bad, but also, really, good or bad is just a human concept. Nature doesn't care. God, or whatever created all of this, there's no good or bad.
Yeah. I was thinking, I did a Facebook Live a couple nights ago in the hotel when I was speaking out in Greenville, Texas, for their city leaders and stuff. And the night before I started thinking about labels. Like, when we label people, we label groups of people, we label things, and how dangerous that can be to us. Because when you think about a label, if I go, he's a liberal, or she's a conservative Christian, there are so many accurate pieces of baggage you could probably accurately assume about that person and go, I know who they voted for. They're probably not out partying on the weekends, or that person's probably gay, or they support gay rights, or like there's so many things that when we hear a label, we assume, and sometimes we might be correct in some of those assumptions, but there's a lot of margin for being incorrect. Like I always say that I would so much rather sit down and have coffee with a terrorist before going to war.
Yeah.
Because at least then I can sit down and go, hey, it's my understanding you hate me, and I don't know you, so can you tell me why?
Mm-hmm.
And just like, let's at least put it out there, and because I don't hate you, like I don't even know you until you're pointing a gun at me and my friends and shooting or flying airplanes into buildings or something like that. Like, okay, now you've given me reason out of survival to have to defend against you by killing you. But like when we give, I think at this point in life, for me, labels are an easy, irresponsible way to quickly judge and dismiss people because we don't want to do the hard work of trying to understand them.
Yeah. Because
with a label, we can just, oh, that's what that means. Okay, Christian, write them off. We already know what they're doing. They're Trumpsters. They're this, they're that. Or liberal, oh, yep, they're this, they're that, they're communist. And maybe some of them, that's true for a lot of them, in each of those groups. They're gay, they're straight, they're whatever. There's all these different there's all this different associated information that is a baggage that's attached to labels. But people who are not like me, who are very different than me, who I've ever actually sat down with and talked, even if I didn't know they were different than me before I talked to them, and then I found out later they're not anything like me. I've always walked away going, I don't agree with their lifestyle, or I don't agree with what they're doing, or I don't believe what they believe, but I can sort of see how they got there. I can sort of see how they came to that conclusion. I can sort of understand. And the problem in the world we live in today is everybody throws around labels and everyone's wanting to judge and label, but nobody's like actually having conversations.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
I like to be open-minded about anybody I come across as well. And for a lot of the reasons you just mentioned, but also if I am dismissing somebody because they are different from me, they believe something different from me or whatever, that I feel like that's pretty egotistical of me, because that's me saying, I know I'm right and I know you're wrong. And
you know everything about them, not just the things you disagree with.
Yeah.
You've got them summed up.
Well, even the stuff that I disagree with, I don't know with 100% certainty that I'm right and they're wrong. I think that I'm right.
So do they.
Yeah, and so do they. And they're no more important than I am. I'm not above them. That's just another human being, And
you're also not below them.
And I'm not below them. We both don't really know. We're just taking our best guess. And your best guess is different from my best guess. And so for that reason, it's like, it's more of a reason to interact with those people, because maybe I'll get closer to the truth if I hear their perspective.
You combine what they think is true with what you know to be true. And sometimes you get a whole different insight and go, well, wait a minute, I've never thought about it this way. Mm-hmm. And then you come to a different conclusion. Yeah, so I always tell people, like, my life is so much better when I stopped labeling people and got curious. Instead of like, oh, he or she is this or that, I'm curious, like, why are you? It's that question from The Office. Why are you the way you are? And I think I said that in a previous episode, but Michael Scott talking to Toby, I think, but it's seriously like, what led you to this place where you are now the way you are? Like, I love learning, and my life is better when I know more, in general, and my life is more fun when I understand how people came to be where they are. Yeah. And I also have deeper connections with people, which is more fulfilling. Sure. With friends, where it's not just surface level. Like, I understand how this guy got to where he's at and how he is. I don't have to like it, agree with it, believe in it, but like, oh, now at least I can explain that, and we can all be better because we understand each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And then talking about labels, we do it to ourselves too. We all label ourselves, right? Like, it's important to people like, well, this is an extreme example, but like you look at the gender thing, right? Like if you're born a man and you want to transition to become a woman, we can argue all day if that's good or bad, but that's a person that wants everybody to know my label is woman. That's why we're the pronouns thing. Like it's like a popular thing right now. Like,
Yeah.
my pronouns are these. I want you to give me these labels, and I want you to make all the assumptions that come along with that. That's who I am. I mean, we do it as another example is like if we introduce ourselves as like, oh, I'm a veteran. I'm an Army veteran.
It's an identity thing. Yeah.
I'm an Army veteran, or I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm a guitar player or whatever. And it's like, I'm telling you those things because I'm trying to shorthand for you. I'm trying to help you get to know me a little better. I want you to make assumptions about me based on the labels that I'm putting on myself.
Yeah.
So we kind of do that too. Like we use that dynamic in a good way as well. I don't know if it's good, back to good or bad, but we use that for, a positive effect as well.
Yeah. Well, and then you think, why would we want to label and distinguish ourselves? What gives us that desire? It's probably because we live in a world where being labeled something can be advantageous or give us a sense of belonging, like, oh, we belong to this group or that group. Well, what if we all just saw each other as human?
Yeah.
Like, hey, that's just another human. Like, I don't give a shit what you think you are or don't think you are or don't know you are, or you're physically this, but mentally you think you're that. Like, I don't know anything about that 72 genders thing. I'm the last guy to ask. I don't know anything. Yeah. I mean, I understand what's going on, but I'm not like the expert to talk about it. So, but I'm just like, I don't give a shit what you think you are. Like, can we have coffee?
Yeah.
Can you tell me, oh my God, you like classic rock? Pink Floyd is one of your favorite bands ever too? Like, I don't know what kind of thing you got between your legs or don't, or what you think it is in your head. But dude, we both like Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we first started playing guitar, it's just like Wayne's World. We tried to play Stairway, and the people in Guitar Center just rolled their eyes. And you're like, dude, you're not even doing it. No Stairway. But it's like, it's like we all have so much in common, and it's like, man, if we could just put the differences aside. I'm not saying if someone's actively being hurt. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if we're sitting in a coffee shop and this guy's got a man bun, a tie-dye t-shirt, not that you're gay if you wear tie-dyes and have a man bun, but if there's a bunch of things and the guy looks gay.
Yeah.
And then he has the talk where any of the mannerisms, okay, like I can probably safely assume he is. Mm-hmm. Or maybe the lady with the butch biker haircut, maybe she just likes short hair. I could be totally wrong in these assumptions. But why would I not, if they have cool glasses, why would me, coming from someone who comes from the opposite end of the social spectrum, more conservative, why would I not go, dude, sorry if you're not a dude, but, or you don't identify as a dude, those are the coolest glasses I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone with glasses like that. Like I saw a guy a few weeks ago with a pair of glasses. I'd never seen any of them look like this. Now he was with a lady, so he wasn't like gay or anything, but it was like they're black rimmed and just the certain design. I'd never seen it. I'm like, dude, those are the coolest glasses. But even if he sounded and looked like he's in a different lifestyle than me, I would still say, dude, those are cool glasses. And you know what? He would feel good about that.
Yeah.
Be like, man, this guy's really nice. He complimented my glasses. Everyone likes compliments. And I was being real. Like, they were cool.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, now we have like this friendly connection where it doesn't matter what he's wearing or what he is or isn't or thinks he is or how he lives. It's like, we're just two people.
Yeah.
And like, there was a friendly connection, and why shouldn't there be?
Yeah, I mean, a good way to sum that up is like we all have more in common than what our differences are. Like if our only difference is sexual preference, or maybe there's 5 things that we don't have in common. There's usually
5 big differences.
500 things that we do have in common. We all desire love. We all want to protect and feed our families. We all, enjoy music and want to eat dinner tonight.
Want to feel loved and accepted.
Yeah.
And we can be ourselves for who we really are without being told we should be someone else that we know we're not.
Yeah. So let's focus on the similarities. Looks like we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's
on me. I need to get going soon. But
yeah.
This was another good episode, I think.
I think it was. Yeah, we talked about did we come into this world or did we come out of this world, and the ideas, beliefs, philosophies kind of behind that, the implications and what it means based on what we believe, and how that's helpful or not so helpful or maybe even harmful based on how you see it. And
if you have any thoughts about anything that we've said today, good or bad, send us a note. Questions about life podcast at gmail.com.
Yep.
Hopefully you're watching this on YouTube. You can leave us a comment or something and let us know how you feel.
Yeah, and if you like what we're talking about here and you're listening to this on a podcast, whatever platform, feel free to give us likes and reviews and stars. If you do like it, leave a review. It only takes 10, 20 seconds to say something about what you liked or what was helpful. And if you don't, well, do that too. We don't care. But we're just recording conversations we have anyway.
We're going to
sharing
it
with
anyway,
you.
Yeah. So, but we'd love to. We hope to be able to share it with the people that are interested in these things.
Yep. So make sure you subscribe if you want to get notified when we post the next episode. This is Brian and Daniel with questions about life.
Thanks for watching, guys.